move on to our distinguished gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Estes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for being here today. You know, over the past 2 years, we've seen violence spiral out of control across the country, both in major metropolitan areas as well as along the southern border. This is a serious problem and must be addressed. But this rise in violent crime is not because of a sudden increase in firearms. For almost 30 years, crime rate was trending down while gun ownership was increasing. 2020 marks the recent rise in violence and homicides across the nation. I don't think it's a coincidence that this rise followed the repeated slogans like defund the police and open borders. Today, violent crime is up more than 40% from last year in New York City, and in LA, murders are on track to top a 15-year record. Defunding the police has been a disaster for Americans living in our largest cities. And a corresponding wave of drug-related crimes caused by open border policies from the Biden administration are making a bad problem much worse. In 2021, drug overdose deaths in the United States reached an all-time high, up 17% from the prior year. And fentanyl, which continues to pour across the border, is now the leading cause of death for Americans 18 to 45. We urgently need to address the underlying causes of violence. That starts with giving our law enforcement the proper respect they deserve for keeping the peace and by making sure that violent criminals are sentenced properly by district attorneys. The recent attacks on police officers have been horrific. Over 141 officers shot, 27 of those being ambush-style attacks so far in 2022. It's no wonder why more than 2,100 cops have resigned or retired this year in New York City, over 500 of those occurring just in June. We can't reverse the past 2-year trend in shooting and homicides if we don't have any police. If we're going to have a real conversation about ways to reduce violence within our communities, we've got to include ending anti-cop hostility. It's time we get back to law and order in the country. We must prosecute violent criminals, and we must secure the border. Ms. Swear, in a hearing earlier this year before the Senate, you were cut off before while discussing some data about rogue prosecutors. What role do they have to play in reducing violent crime in Chicago and other cities that may have seen a spike in crime?
Thank you. Sorry, I think it does two things. So first of all, whenever you are not prosecuting crimes, when you're not ensuring that those small minority of individuals who are responsible for a majority of violent crime are incarcerated or meaningfully punished and are off the streets, they continue to be re-released. They continue to be out there facilitating a lot of these same violent crimes over and over again. And at the same time, when they are not being punished, it at the very least does not disincentivize them and often incentivizes them to commit violence because they understand that there's not going to be a serious punishment for those offenses. So it's problematic both from a very practical standpoint, but also from the theoretical standpoint of signaling to them that their offenses are not going to be taken seriously.
How do firearms help women protect themselves from violent attacks?
They, in many respects, equalize their ability against their assailants. So women, especially compared to male attackers, and I say this as a fairly athletic woman myself, we tend to be a little bit undersized and less physically capable against larger opponents. Firearms, again, whether it's a woman, whether it's anybody, whether it's a man, someone who is suffering from some sort of physical handicap, it greatly increases their ability to defend themselves, and a lot of times to do so at a distance, and often without even having to fire that gun. Just the mere threat of it is enough to deter and to back people off. But it's capable of being used for when that is not sufficient.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as we've talked about, in the whole context of this hearing was talking about the economic impact of violence. And obviously we need to address the gun violence issue, but I think a lot of that allows people to have weapons for their self-defense, make sure that we support the police in their role in helping protect our communities, protecting our country. So I appreciate your time, and I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.